Hey guys, welcome to sunny Okinawa, and today I'm going to be showing you how I plan, shoot and edit my GoPro time-lapse sequences using LRTimelapse Pro, which is the de facto editing software for time-lapse sequences. We've come to the beautiful location that is Cape Zanpa. Behind me there you should be able to see the lighthouse. We're going to get a bit further away because there's a really nice long shot that I want to get. We've got beautiful clouds in the sky. My main theme, or my main focus, is the clouds. They are moving at quite a good clip, so with a time lapse, all of that speeded up should be absolutely awesome. So without further ado, I've got about a 10-minute walk ahead of me. We'll go and get into location, and from there I'll take you through the steps. Okay folks, well I'm set up. We've got this beautiful vista of these really dramatic cliffs that go all the way along the coastline here, culminating in at the very point the lighthouse, the Zanpa lighthouse. I'm shooting on a GoPro which is tucked just down here at the moment in order to get as much of this dramatic scene of these cliffs as possible. And what I've also got is I've got it on a clamp. Yeah, so the rocks around here are very volcanic. There's lots of little peaks, and just the formation of the rock lends itself nicely to employing the use of a clamp, because I can get it really low, looking down over a cliff, but super secure. So it's actually going to be quite a dramatic point of view, looking through the camera lens. All right, but let's talk a little bit more about time-lapse and the planning of a time-lapse with regards to the kind of drama that you want to create in your sequence. Time-lapse is an awesome element to include in any production. It adds a tremendous amount of production value, as in it just gives it that extra boost. It takes what would be potentially a mundane scene and it transfers it into a sequence with incredible dynamics. Now, in order for a time-lapse to work correctly, you need to have something, your focal element in the image, that has a certain amount of motion to it. That can be as mechanical as clouds passing in the sky, or as intermittent as, let's say, a set of traffic lights or people walking in a crowd, etc., etc. But as long as you have that majority element of your image that is motion, then time-lapse is going to be an incredible potential to treat that sequence with. All right. Now, when you do shoot with your time-lapse, there are certain things that you need to plan in order for it to work correctly. And the first one we're going to look at is interval. Now, with your video, you normally have about 30 frames per second, okay, normally. If you were to go to the cinema, for example, normally for cinema delivery, production is made at 24 frames per second. In order to just slow things down a little bit, there's a little bit more blur on each of the frames, just to give it that more kind of softer cinematic feel, okay? Likewise, if you go up to higher resolutions, such as 4K, even 8K nowadays, what you'll find is that the delivery of those mediums generally tends to be done so at a greater frames per second in order to retain the clarity and the definition that resolution requires. Okay, so you'll see that a lot of like ultra high definition films may use 48 frames per second frame rate, even up to 60 frames, even 96 in severe cases, and that all just goes to enable the massive resolution and clarity that you get when you're shooting with those mediums. Now, what you can do from there is you can do the math, a little bit of math unfortunately, just to figure out and create certain dynamic time-lapse sequences that use elements within the scene that you're shooting to lend themselves greater, to add even greater dynamic to that sequence. Let's say, for example, a sunset. Now, at 30 frames a second, if I elongate that interval between each one of those 30 frames, let's say to 10 seconds, it's going to take me 300 seconds in order to accomplish 1 second of video, all right? Because you've got 30 images with a 10-second interval, 30 images times 10 seconds, 300 seconds, all right? So 300 seconds is 5 minutes. So for every 5 minutes that I'm shooting time-lapse, at that interval, I only get 1 second of playback time-lapse at the end of the day, all right? So if I want to get 10 seconds of time-lapse, I need to shoot for 50 minutes, sorry. If I want to get 20 seconds of time-lapse, I have to shoot for 100 minutes. That's 1 hour and 40 minutes, all right? So what I can do is I can take that 1 hour and 40 minutes, I can cross-reference against against the time of the setting sun, for example, and I can backtrack then to find what is my cutoff time to start shooting that time-lapse if I want to have the sunset at the end of that sequence. Okay, and then likewise you can use that kind of approach to your planning in order to accomplish specific looks in a time-lapse that may require, or that you may want to have, that additional element of dynamic involved. All right, on this particular time-lapse I'm going to be shooting 48 frames per second, and I'm going to be going all afternoon. Okay, there's going to be a no-brainer. I haven't really done any math on it because I am going to be running or filming for about 3 hours. Okay, so, and then once we get back to the studio, we'll go through in greater clarity with regards to the edit, how I approach the edit, and what the final look is going to be when we're all said and done. Okay, awesome. Okay, well here I am, it's the next day, and I'm back in my office. Let's get into the edit. I'm going to try and make this as quickly as possible. I use two softwares for my time-lapse editing. One is Adobe Lightroom and the other one is LRTimelapse Pro. Okay, now I've already selected I've downloaded the images that I shot last night with the GoPro, and I've already loaded those into LRTimelapse Pro, but it's basically just a very simple operation by highlighting the folder where your image files are kept, okay, in your directory, and that's listed down here in this box in the lower left hand side. Okay, and what you've got here then, you've got in your user interface, you have the viewer pretty much where your image reference files are shown, and then in the main box here on the right hand side you've got all of your images listed 1, 2, 3 down to however many you've got. Now I'm shooting at 48 frames a second for this particular time lapse, and so I actually shot a massive almost 2,400 images, in fact 2,398. I did have to get rid of 1 or 2 at the beginning and end just because of a little bit of wobble, but it would have been around 2,400. Okay, now at 48 frames a second, that's going to give us basically 50 seconds of playtime. All right, so it's going to be quite a long time lapse, but why not? You know, awesome. And with a 5-second interval between the frames, the motion in the image should be quite awesome. Now I can press and get a preview of what it looks like without any edit just by pressing this button here, and you can see lots of nice clouds, lots of movement. You can then, I can skip forward over to here. You can just scrub through and just see pretty much what's happening there. Looks pretty awesome. Okay, LRTimelapse is very simple in its process. All you do is you basically follow the commands that are shown in the boxes on the top of the main frame here. You have your first option is to select the number of keyframes you want to have for your editing process. Okay, and basically what a keyframe is a benchmark from where you want certain aesthetic changes to take place from, and then in between, all of the incremental frames in between. Okay, I'm actually going to set 4 keyframes just because I want to keep a rein on the fact that we went all through the afternoon into the evening, so I just want to be able to have greater control over the final aesthetic of the whole sequence. If I choose to go 3, all I do is I slide that, and you'll see that these blue markers here, which are your keyframe indicators, okay, they will adjust accordingly. Slide it down to 2 and you get 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end. Slide it all the way up to 10 and you'll see boom, 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 all of these blue keyframes appear. These are all going to be your edit points later on when you switch to Adobe Lightroom. Okay, so I've got 4 of my markers here, 4 keyframes here. Now, in the main frame where you've got all of your frames, listed, okay, you've got a little indicator here for your keyframe. Okay, you can enable that or disable that depending on how you feel. Now, if you select 4 keyframes from the slider here, all it's going to do is LRTimelapse is going to place those 4 keyframes at even distances along the timeline of your time lapse. Okay, but you may not want that. You may want to have a keyframe at a very specific point, a very sharp change in light, etc., etc. And so what you can do is you can actually just disable that keyframe there, for example, and then choose wherever you want to place your keyframe. It can be up here, okay, so you've adjusted it, or it can be back to where it was. Okay. So we're just going to have these 4 here. Let's take that one off. There we go. So we've got these 4 keyframes here. Okay. Now I've got my keyframes. I don't need that anymore, so I just hide that. All I then do is press save, which is the next command in the toolbar, and you'll see at the top what's happening. You've got a progress bar, sorry, and that's just going to go all the way along until it's saved the additional EXIF information for those 4 keyframes. Okay, but it has to go through the whole sequence as a whole, which is why it's just a tad slow, but we'll catch that up in a short while. Okay, so that's saved. Okay, and then finally what we do here for the first phase, you've got a button here and it says basically drag to Lightroom. Okay, so we've got Lightroom open in the background here. So all you do is you grab this button with your mouse, drag it into your main view pane on Lightroom, and then edit, select all, and you import all of the images. Now that's going to go through and start importing everything through to Lightroom. So let's just let that catch up and we'll get back to you as soon as we are uploaded. Okay, well now that the files have loaded, what we've got down, we've got all of the images from the sequence in the file here, okay, in the import pane. Now in order to make life easier, simpler, we've got a filter down here that will allow us to filter just the keyframes that we created in LRTimelapse Pro. Okay, at the very beginning, here they are here, first, second, third, fourth keyframes. Okay, so what we do from here is we go in and we start to edit. So we go to, we've got this one selected, the first one selected, we go to develop. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do that I always do is I'll sort out the crop, the alignment. okay, and I will carry that across all of the images, because you'll see in a minute there is one operation that I need to do, but that isn't automated by LRTimelapse Pro. Okay, so, and that is basically the crop. All right, so let's go ahead and sort out our crop. The original, we're going to go 16:9. Okay, and so this is our frame here. We need to figure out how much of the frame we want dedicate. I want to try and keep this rocking down the bottom. I think that's an integral aspect of the composition. So I think something like that's pretty cool for my crop. So I'm going to go ahead and crop that. I've straightened out the horizon. That's going to be my scene for the time lapse, which I think is awesome. And then from there, all I'm going to do is go up to settings, copy settings, and all I'm going to copy is the crop. So I'm going to check none. Let's just go process calibration, or process version, sorry. I haven't done any lens corrections. All I'm going to do is crop. Okay, so straighten and aspect ratio. So I'm going to copy that, and then just by using my advanced keys forward and back, I'm going to swing over to the next frame, next keyframe, and settings, paste settings. Okay, and step forward again, settings, paste settings, and step forward to the last keyframe, settings, paste settings. There we go. So all now the crop for all of these images is good to go. Okay, so from here now we can sort out the main edit. Okay, and the way that I carry those across, there is an automated way that you'll see in just a moment. So all I do here is I will do a very rough edit just to get the images a little bit as to how I like them. Okay, for the edit, a little bit of dehaze. Let's get rid of some of that. There was quite a bit of sea mist around. Okay, so let's boost up the dehaze a little bit, not too much. 38 is good. I'm not shooting my GoPro in ProTune. Okay, so I don't have any different GoPro color spectrum overlaid into the image, and I'm shooting in linear mode, as you can see here. There's no bowing, there's no distortion from the GoPro as you normally associate with the GoPro, because this was shot in linear mode. All right, so, and I'm not going to do any lens corrections. Let's just remove any potential for chromatic aberration. Okay, cool. And again, with GoPro, I'm not going to sharpen anything. Okay, I think it's sharp enough, and it's quite sharp anyway, because it's a photograph as opposed to video. And so then later on, there's a bit more motion blur, a little bit of blur in the image, but that then allows it to be perceived more as video, as film, as opposed to video. Okay, so the main changes that I'm going to do are just small changes up here in the main settings. Okay, the basic settings. White's good. Okay, black's cool. A little bit of clarity. Okay, I'll do clarity on landscapes but not on faces. There's no faces in this, so let's boost that a little bit. Vibrance, let's go up, say 22. Okay, saturation's good. Okay, I mean, I'm okay with that. Now there is another trick. You may think that the coast here, the cliffs are a little bit dark. Maybe they are. I could boost those with the shadows a bit, but there is actually a little trick that I do in the editing when I get into Final Cut Pro that's going to aid that a little bit more. Okay, so let's just hang off on any more of the edit for this. Okay, all I then do is I then go to Library. Okay, and what I then do is I will go to select all of the remaining frames, okay, by Shift and click down on all of the frames, and then up here in the top left of the screen you've got this little script icon. If you click that, you've got an LRTimelapse sync keyframe script. So, okay, so just select that, and now what's going to happen is the edits that I've just made on that first keyframe are going to be applied to all of the subsequent keyframes. Okay, so that in effect what it does when I now go here into my second keyframe and I want to develop that, okay, where I am now on my edit is at the same aesthetic value that I had set for my first keyframe. So that sets the benchmark from where I will now make any changes, if I'm going to make any changes. Okay, now I might boost a little bit the shadows here. Okay, not a lot, just a little bit. We've got direct sunlight here. Okay, so I don't want to get it too glary, but this looks like it may be pretty funky. All right, and so same thing again. All I then do is I'll go back into library, I'll shift and click select all of the remaining 2 keyframes this time and hit that script sync button. Okay, so do that, the changes have been made. Okay, and I'll pick my 3rd keyframe. As you can see, we're getting later in the day here. The only thing I don't like about GoPro is they really can't handle the sun. The direct sun very well. You just get this big white blob in the middle of the screen, but show me a digital camera that can hold up that kind of abuse on the highlights, and I'll be set to buy my next camera. Anyway, so let's develop this a little bit. Let's go shadows just a little bit more, okay, but not getting crazy. So I'm just going to boost just a little tiny touch the dehaze, okay, but again I'm happy with that. All right, so then we go same system again, come out to library, shift click the, go into view, there we go, shift click that final frame, sync that using the script, okay, and then go into there and make any final aesthetic changes that I feel are necessary. Okay, so let's just go into develop. Okay, let's have a look now at the shadows. Let's get a little bit more shadows here. Highlights, we can come back on there just a little bit until we've got the, yeah, there we go, that's awesome. And the vibrance, alright, that's cool. Okay, alright, so as a sequence I'm happy with that. I'm going to go to library, go out to view all of the keyframes. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these. Okay, now because we've made the changes in these files, what we need to do is to carry that through to the metadata of the file. So all we do up here is we go to metadata, okay, and now save metadata to files. Okay, we've changed the metadata of these files and now we're just saving that, and you'll see why that is a vital step in a very short while. Now, as a personal preference, what I do then from there is I'll just go back here and I'll select full sequence. It just makes it easier for when I come back later on. Okay, we're finished with Lightroom for now. Okay, so all we do then is we go back to LRTimelapse. Okay, we've done the edit. We're coming back into LRTimelapse and we've made changes in the edit. So what we need to do now is reload. Okay, so click the reload button. You'll see the progress bar at the top. All that's doing now is it's reloading the metadata from all of the files in this sequence. Okay, what you'll also see now is an overlay of the crop. You'll notice here on the straight line it is a bit wonky. This is the realignment. This is the crop that I made. So that's just an overlay of the crop that I made in Lightroom. Okay. From here now, next button, auto transition. We'll click that, and what that is doing now is quite an important little step. Is that what it's doing? You've got all of your keyframes here, yeah. Now you'll notice that, or you'll noted that I've just made an edit on this keyframe and to all of these subsequent keyframes. Now auto transition, what that's doing is it's taking the initial aesthetic of the time lapse from this first keyframe and it's making the incremental changes to every frame between that start keyframe and the next keyframe. Okay, and then any changes that were made to the subsequent keyframes, again all of those incremental per frame changes have been now plugged into the metadata of the files that make up the complete sequence. Okay, and that's what that auto transition is. Okay, the next step is a deflicker, and all this does is that just, I normally go up to about a value of 35, and you'll see it was down here at 30. If you look at the luminosity path of the sequence marked by this green, if I go like this and push the slider up, you'll see that it levels all the way out. I mean, you can even go, I mean, we can go 35, we can go all the way if we want. Let's see how that goes. Okay, put it up to 50, press apply. Okay, and that's now going to apply that. We can click that to get rid of it, and just by pressing save, again, it's going to save all of the detail, all of the changes that we've made, all of the metadata for the deflicker and the auto transition. That now is all being saved to the individual frames of the sequence. And you'll notice again that it's going a little bit slow, okay, because it's got almost 2,400 images to do. So we'll catch up again when that is done. Okay, now that that is loaded, we go back into Lightroom. Okay, first thing, what I normally do from here is just so that I can associate these files with its root directory. I just go up, I highlight one of the photos, I just go photo, go to folder in library. I will then select edit all, select all. Because all of the metadata in all of the images was changed, we need to transfer that across now into Lightroom. So all we do here is at the top we go to metadata and read metadata from files. Now you'll know that you're on the right track when you see the images that are not keyframes adopt the aspect ratio and the aesthetic of its nearest keyframe, and there you can see that starting to happen here along the top. They're adjusting to 16:9 aspect ratio, and you can see that they have changed in their appearance to follow the suite of the edit. Okay, now that we are loaded, okay, what we need to do is export all of these files so that LRTimelapse can compile the final time-lapse sequence. All right. Now the way that we do that is we select edit, select all, export. Okay, and you get your export dialog box comes up, and down here you'll notice that you've got this is your, in the upper part you've got your standard Lightroom export options, and then because you've got the LRTimelapse Pro plugin set up, we now have this additional set of options here that allow us to select what it is or how we want to export these files for this particular sequence. Now, bearing in mind that this process can take a long time depending on how you A, how many frames you've got, and B, the quality that you attribute to each one of these frames. And you'll notice here that you can just do a standard JPEG, which is what we're going to do on this option at 4K resolution, or you can go JPEG to original resolution, because I may have used, for example, a DSLR which has got a greater resolution than the GoPro, especially my 5DSr, which I believe is 8,800 odd by 5,700 pixels. So huge resolution, approaching 8K or beyond 8K actually. And then here you can also you can either go JPEG or you can go TIFF 8-bit or TIFF 16-bit. So depending on how you want to, the quality of your clip depends on the encoding that you attribute to each file. If I was doing something for a client for a broadcast option, then definitely I would do Pro, LRT Pro, TIFF 16 bits, but bearing in mind that each one of those frames is going to be a monster. Okay, it's going to be about 200 to 300 megabytes per monster. Okay, so crazy times. So we're just going to go with the JPEG option for this particular sequence. What you'll notice here is you've got your LRTimelapse for app root selected. It will give you your output path. Okay, what I want to do is I want to put that in its own specific location. So let's go to my time-lapse folder. There it is there, and I'm going to create another folder with Zanpa GoPro. Zanpa GoPro. There we are. So we'll put that in. That's the new folder.
we will press OK. Okay, so there's my output path, Zanpa GoPro, and if I want to give the sequence a name, I will. Let's just say Cliffs GoPro, awesome, and we press export. And that now what that's going to do is it's going to evaluate the complete sequence, and it's going to prepare it ready for export. And you can see here the dialog box is now, it's going to go prepare export. It will then check all of the aspect ratios just to make sure that all of the aspect ratios are good, and then it's going to start clunking away and creating each one of the frames that subsequently LRTimelapse Pro will construct the finished item with. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the render now in Lightroom. What you'll see in just a moment is LRTimelapse is going to pick up again automatically once these final files are rendered out. So now LRTimelapse has kicked back in, and you can see here in the main box you've got this on the front and center on the screen here, you've got your render out box. Okay, and just to quickly go through that, starting at the top left, we have the task or the sequence that we named earlier on in our export. Here it is here, its location. Okay, and the output file with the codec that is currently selected with this with these options here, and you'll notice that it changes in a minute depending on what it is that how it is that we want to have the final sequence rendered. Okay, so let's say for example the codecs are here. You've got your MPEG-4, H.264, your ProRes or your H.265, okay, which is at this moment experimental. These are the codecs that are used to provide you with your video. The output size of the video, you can go to 720p if you want, 1080p standard definition, 3K, 4K, okay, and if your resolution allowed, you could go up to 8K or just remain with the source resolution. Okay, I'm just going to go 1080p. Okay, and what you'll notice here is when we do make any change, look up here, the file name, you'll see it's got the ProRes, the codec here, ProRes, and then it will also have the resolution. So at the moment I'm on 1080p. Okay, let's say if I went to 4K UHD, it would go 4K UHD in the file name. Okay, I'm going to stick with 1080p. Frame rate, okay, I'm shooting at 48 frames a second, so boom, we'll put that down there, and here you'll see up here again in the name, it's changed to 48 frames, okay, and UHQ, which is ultra high quality, UH, okay, on the quality slider, if I went high, again, high quality, HQ, you can't go any lower than medium, and I can't go any lower than a high. Color sampling, let's go back to ultra high. Color sampling is 444, which means it renders as it sees it. 422 there would be slight compression, and 420 a bit more compression. Okay. Up here you have an option to add or to reduce motion blur. Okay. You don't want to have the image looking too staccato. Okay. And so you can, if you want to, you introduce a bit of motion blur just to give you that filmic impression. I'm shooting at 48 frames per second, so I don't really want to soften down the image. I want it to be as crisp and clear as possible. So I'm not going to have or introduce any motion blur. Again, I'm not going to add any sharpening, and I'm not going to overlay a copyright overlay, which you can create and within the settings for LRTimelapse Pro. Just one word about this motion blur setting though. What you may notice if you do decide to use it, okay, is the first and the last frame of your sequence are going to appear as if they don't have, or that their colors are a little bit dull, and the edit hasn't really been affected too well to that particular slide or that particular frame, the very first and the very last. Okay, for some reason, not sure why that happens, but it does. If you don't use any motion blur by chance, then your whole sequence is uniform, it's colourful, it's nice, it's as you intended it to be. So that is the settings that I normally attribute to my video. From there, it's just a case here to render video, and what you'll see now, that dialog box disappears, and down in the bottom here you have a progress bar, and what you're going to see in a minute is, there you go, it's started already now, it's blue, and that's going to go all the way along until the final sequence, or the final frame of the sequence, has been rendered. Okay, so again, we're going to come back when it's ready. It's got a long way to go yet, so we're just getting up to the end of the build, as it were, by LRTimelapse Pro. You can see down here the progress bar getting up towards the end. When this comes to an end, because it is quite a lengthy process at times, there is actually an audible alarm that just tings. You'll hear it in a minute, and it's just to allow the user to give them a heads up that their render is complete. There we go, the lovely sound of a completed build. All right, and now from there, because we've pretty much finished with LRTimelapse and Lightroom, so we can go ahead and we can close these down. I'll get rid of the images later on when I've checked to make sure that the time lapse is fine. But now in Lightroom you do have the option to work with ND filters, and normally I would have applied ND filters in the edit if it wasn't a GoPro project, but I do actually have a system where I just wanted to check. Open file, let's have a look at this. So where is, there we go, go to Timelapse, there's Zanpa, and there is my file there. Let's open that. Okay, and there we are, front and center. There is our time lapse. Now you'll see here it's 50 seconds. This is how we planned it at the beginning. What a gorgeous little time lapse. But the edit isn't actually finished. I do have something else that I do in Final Cut Pro, and I will show you exactly what that is just now. I just wanted to visually check and make sure that the time lapse itself came out fine, and it looks like it did. Lovely, lovely. It's just awesome how these clouds just built up right at the very end, like straight over the top. Crazy. Cool beans, how is that? That's just amazing. Okay, and that is it. Okay, so let's just close this down. Alright, well I'm in Final Cut Pro now. This is my video editing suite. And what I'm going to do, first off, let's go and just grab the time lapse that we've just made. Here we are. Okay, so let's import that. That now is, where is 2829? There we go. So we'll put that on the timeline. Okay, so here is our clip here. Here is our 50-second time-lapse clip. Looks awesome, right? And I mentioned earlier on that I could have put an ND filter on this in Lightroom, but I found a way of doing that in Final Cut that actually gives, I think, better results. And all I've done up here, you will be able to see it. In Photoshop, I've created ND filters. Okay, soft grad. There we go. And all I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take that from the library and I'm going to overlay it on my clip. Now you'll see that it blocks out the clip until I set the blend mode over here to overlay. And there we go. And now you've got the overlay there. You can see it's quite dramatic up in the top of the image. So all I need to do is just reduce the amount of overlay, or the opacity. So even if we go to like 50%, there we go, you'll see here that is what it's like with and without, and it just gives a bit more light here in the shadows, okay, and it just blocks out a little bit more, gives a bit more drama to the clouds, okay. And if I want to source that all the way along, all I need to do is just drag that to the end of the clip, and there we go. And what you'll see now is at the end here is, see how dramatic those clouds look there, and here's what it's like without. So you can see it's quite a big jump. It looks quite bland and washed out there, whereas that gives it quite a lot more dynamic kind of delivery, okay. So all I need to do now is just let that render with the rest of the movie, and we'll be good to go. So that's how I create and edit my time lapses. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will hopefully see you very, very soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.